This day is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Hemmer, and this is This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. As regular listeners know, each week during the first year of the second Trump administration, we are offering up some Sunday context. Today, we're revisiting a frosty moment in U.S.-Canada relations and how some beer-based diplomacy helped accelerate a thaw. We've talked about Canada a lot in the show, not just because it's America's northern neighbor, but because the two countries share a special relationship. At times, tensions have run high. There have been border disputes as both nations expanded, conflicts over freedom and emancipation, tense negotiations over resources and trade policy. But I don't think there's ever been a moment as tense as this one, at least not since the late 19th century or possibly even the War of 1812. Because while trade tensions have often cooled the relationship, those negotiations have always remained centered on economics. Under the new Trump administration, economic warfare has been combined with the threat of annexation. New reporting suggests that this is not an idle threat. It's not random provocation. Donald Trump himself has threatened to break border treaties and use economic devastation to violate Canadian sovereignty. Bellicosity and territorial expansion have become a key part of the new Trump administration. In less than 2 months, the administration has shredded some of the most significant international relationships that the U.S. has developed over more than a century. It signals a new era of U.S. foreign policy, one in which the U.S. is a powerful pariah state, and where alienated allies look to forge new coalitions apart from, and even against, the United States. For all the twists and turns of U.S. foreign policy over the centuries, this marks something entirely new for the country, and something even our closest allies now must guard against. With all that in mind, let's turn to this episode from last year about U.S.-Canadian relations, with a bit of Irish charm thrown in just for fun. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome to This Day from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, March 17th, 1985, U.S. President Ronald Reagan arrives to meet Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney in Quebec City. Now, this came to be known, this meeting between the two, as the Shamrock Summit. They both had Irish backgrounds, and they did start the meeting on St. Patrick's Day. But before I continue with the intro, I just want to lodge a formal complaint with the Historical Event Naming Committee because the Shamrock Summit is really confusing to me. It should include something actually Irish or be in Ireland in some concrete way. I do find it confusing. The Shamrock Summit was a meeting between the U.S. President and the Canadian Prime Minister in Canada. That said, it's a very interesting moment because they do meet at a moment when relations between the two countries are a little shakier than they had been in the past. And I will say that the whole Irish thing did kind of help with the vibes of the meeting, which we will get into. So let's go to Quebec City. It's St. Patrick's Day. Here we are at the Shamrock Summit. And here, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Hey there.
So I don't know. Do we get to call this an Irish event? Everyone seems to just sort of take that on face value.
No.
I
mean, even in a diaspora sense, I'm not convinced that Ronald Reagan is Irish.
No. I mean, listen, when you trace his ancestry, his paternal great-grandfather was Irish Catholic. I don't think that's close enough. I don't think Reagan's walking around yeah, I'm Irish. I mean, no.
But let's go through the reasons why this is sort of thought of as an Irish event. Maybe listeners in Ireland will tell us what they think. But I will say, we've gotten a couple emails about this, including from a listener named Colin, who's Canadian, who framed this as the Shamrock Summit and pointed out why some of the Irishness really did help, and then obviously talked about what this meant for Canada-U.S. relations. But what are the list of reasons that people think of this as an Irish event? So we have it on St. Patrick's Day. Mm-hmm. We do have this notion that Reagan is
nominally Irish.
Nominally Irish. And then he finds common cause with Mulroney around this too, right?
Right, because Mulroney, he was born to working-class Irish-Canadian parents. He has these real affinity and relational ties to Ireland. And so it does become this nice space of kind of personal connection between Reagan and Mulroney. Reagan didn't just invent his ancestry in the run-up to this trip. It was something that he leaned into, particularly after he was elected president. And so, sometimes just having something in common that doesn't have to do with politics, that doesn't have to do with the tensions between your two countries, that you can kind of joke about and connect over, can make a big difference in the kind of personal diplomacy that presidents engage in. So I do agree that it matters that they had this thing to connect over, because it breaks the ice for what could have been more tense discussions.
But, one other thing that helps kind of smooth over the interpersonal bonding that has to take place at these kinds of summits, lots of alcohol and good music. And so the big thing here is that this all culminates, before we get to the policy stuff, this all culminates in a moment that is captured on video, which lots of people have sent to us and is kind of remarkable. But it is this like ballroom event where Reagan and Mulroney and Nancy Reagan are all swaying back and forth singing When Irish Eyes Are Smiling together and belting it out. And I'm going to assume there were a few beers or other drinks that led to that moment. But, like all good weekend getaways, it culminates in some group singing. And I think that is really the kind of salient moment in this summit. But as we've been saying, it then also has real kind of policy overtones, and they're there ostensibly not just to get drunk and talk about the motherland, but to actually sort of accomplish some things. So what is the state of like Canadian-U.S. relations? What are they there to hash out?
Well, I think people don't realize that Canadian-U.S. relations were sort of cold for a while. The relationship that we have today is not something that was taking place in the 1970s. And so Mulroney is really important because one of the things he campaigned on was sort of restoring this relationship with the United States and getting back on good footing and sort of having a relationship that would allow them to make sort of the trade deals that they want to make and show a sense of solidarity. So for the first time, I think you have Mulroney, who's willing to come to the table, and Reagan as well, who has his own set of ideas about what he would like to accomplish. But they are coming together for the first time, I think, in meaningful ways, politically and economically.
And it's worth pointing out that the reason that relations had become so chilled in large part was due to the Cold War and Canada taking a very different approach to Cold War relations with particularly communist countries. So Canada retains ties with Cuba after the Cuban Revolution. It opens up relations with China before the U.S. does. It doesn't join the U.S. as part of the coalition in the Vietnam War, which U.S. presidents take enormous offense at. And so all of these different moments showed the two countries moving further and further apart, so much so that Richard Nixon, when he was president, is so mad at the first Prime Minister Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, that he says it's time for us to recognize that we have very separate identities, which is something that is a real pushback against what had been deemed a special relationship.
NPR's Throughline podcast sort of feels like stepping into a time machine. Each episode, our Peabody Award-winning show travels beyond the headlines to answer the question, how did we get here? Listen to one of Apple's favorite podcasts of 2024 by searching for Throughline on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app.
A quick word about Up First from NPR. Breaking news, as you've probably noticed, is pretty broken. You're constantly doom scrolling on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, or X, or whatever we're calling it, and maybe you feel a little bit of, I'm over it, I'm over the news. Well, if this sounds like you, I recommend that you listen to the Up First podcast from NPR. You get everything you need to know in an easy 15-minute update. Look, if you listen to this show, it is very likely that you follow the news and you care about politics, just like me. But I think one of the best choices you can make is decide how to engage with the news. And Up First is a perfect way to distill down to just the information you need to help you understand the news without getting overwhelmed and feeling that sense of news paralysis. Up First is national and international. There's facts and information, but there's also personality and analysis. Start your day every day with Up First. Change the way that you consume the news. Listen now to the Up First podcast from NPR. This episode is brought to you by Quince. Folks, it is officially time to start thinking about refreshing your wardrobe for the spring. Maybe even leveling up with a little affordable luxury. Well, Quince is here to help. Quince offers a range of high-quality items at prices within reach. I'll tell you the section of Quince that I'm most excited about, which might tell you something about where my head's at. There's a section on the site called The Vacation Shop. I just ordered a new pair of sunglasses from there. They have an Italian leather sling for under $100, hats, cases, even luggage if you want. I have made a vow to travel in linen and only linen, so I've stocked up on a couple European utility shirts, $45. That's it. And a new pair of nice-looking board shorts, $40. So I am all set for my summer travels. If you've got your eye on all the fun that comes with warm weather, go ahead and give Quince a shot. Go to quince.com/thisday for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/thisday to get free shipping, 365-day returns. Quince.com/thisday. Well, that phrase, special relationship, is a real, I think, watchword in Canadian politics. And people have referred to the relationship between the two countries as the quote unquote special relationship. And kind of the state of diplomacy between the U.S. and Canada is often sort of seen about how special is our relationship right now? Are we maintaining the quote unquote special relationship? We've done episodes about, in the 90s, Bill Clinton went to Canada and kind of dipped his toe into the Quebec separatist vote, and that was deemed as a sort of breach of the special relationship. And so it's always navigating this. So you're right to point out that big moment in the early 70s into the mid 70s where Nixon kind of fractures it. That's really what this moment then serves as, is a kind of repairing of that, both on a policy front and a kind of when you use that word special, it's more are the vibes right? To use a very 2024 framing of it.
Well, and there was real effort on Reagan's behalf to get the vibes right, because one of the things that he had campaigned on in 1980 was this idea of a North American Accord, basically a free trade zone between among the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. And this was sort of a precursor to NAFTA. He didn't have a ton of support for it, and it was going to take over a decade of conversations to make this happen. But when he's meeting with Mulroney at the summit, they begin to lay the groundwork for removing some trade barriers, beginning to set the stage for what would become NAFTA in the early 1990s.
Yeah. Let's circle back a little to the kind of summit itself and what was going on during that as we wrap up a little bit. But, everyone's really leaning into the Irish thing, right? Maybe it's just the St. Patrick's Day. But Reagan is wearing a green tie with shamrocks all over it. They talk about their shared Irish heritage during the joint remarks. They have this big gala where they sing "Irish Eyes Are Smiling." There's a lot of other weird stuff too. They do a pageant skit thing, which is kind of bizarre.
It's weird.
But I don't know. These big diplomatic summits are always so strange. Yeah.
2,000 people there. This is a big gala. This is not just, sort of an intimate party, but it's a performance. Everyone is sort of carefully making sure that the way that they engage with one another is always on the up and up. I mean, it really is a balance for everyone who is watching how people engage with one another.
Yes, everyone is being watched at all times. And like you said, Jody, there is this skit. I don't even know how to convey it to our listeners, because it has the sort of outlines of an SNL skit in that it sounds like it's a set of jokes, but I'm not sure that any of them are funny.
Yeah, it's like a pageant skit thing. There's a thing in New York called the Inner Circle Dinner every year, which I've always found a little icky, but it's kind of where politicians and journalists and so forth go on and do like really cheesy kind of hacky sketches about current affairs, and it's full of like vaudevillian type jokes and so forth. But there's like this is going on. But, I have no doubt this kills in the room. I'm sure it is great, in 1985 in a ballroom in Quebec City when everyone's Irish eyes are smiling.
Because they just had a lot of Irish beer.
Exactly. So
that helps.
So yes, but it is like, they're like cracking jokes about the exchange rate and like doing little little sketches and so forth. So, and Reagan's sitting there and smiling and so forth. So, but, it also is, this is not right at the beginning of Reagan's term, but it's fairly early on, I think, as an indication of kind of the way he likes to do these things. I mean, he clearly likes to go and ham it up and put his arm around world leaders and have these kind of like big long weekend summits with boozing and drinking and sketches and all that stuff. And we've seen it
charming folks and all of that. He knows how to chummy it up to folks.
Yeah, exactly.
He can do that little twinkle in his eye.
Yeah.
All right. We did a nice little mix, as was the Shamrock Summit itself. We did a nice little mix of both the silly and the actual policy stuff that they had to accomplish and to repair that relationship. All right. We will leave it there. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. Our transcripts, which you can find on our website, are done by Kala Nakua. This Day is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, creator-owned, listener-supported podcasts. Audrey Martovich is executive producer. Yuri Lasordo is director of operations. If you want to support the show, tell a friend about This Day and become a member of Radiotopia at whatever level works for you. You can do that at our website, thisdaypod.com. Also on our site, you can find transcripts, sign up for our newsletter, find links to follow us on Instagram and Threads, buy merch like shirts and hats and phone cases, find information about our theme song, give feedback on an episode we've done, or suggest topics for a future episode. That and lots more, thisdaypod.com. My name is Jody Avergan. We'll see you soon.
Radiotopia.